Welcome back to another episode of Kid Zone. So last week we learned about Noah and how his family was kept safe inside the ark and how he was able to keep the animal population safe as well. God sent a flood. We remember that, right? Also, the fact that he sent a promise to never flood the earth again. That's what a rainbow is. So we learned that last week. If you haven't checked that out, make sure you check that out. So, this week we're going to be learning about the time known as the patriarchs. And what that means is the founding fathers of the faith that we have, Christianity, but more importantly, it first started out as something called Judaism. So we're starting with a man named Abram. You probably know him as Abraham. We're going to find out how that all happens today. So let's start with our memory verse. So it's found in Psalms chapter 117, verse 2. It says, "For great is his love toward us, and the faithfulness of the Lord endures forever." So we're going to be learning about the love of God, but more importantly, the faithfulness of God. So let's hop in with number 1. In the city of Ur lived a man named Abraham. Ur was a big city with trees and fountains and buildings. Abraham and his wife Sarah had always lived there, but one day God told Abraham, "I want you to leave Ur. I will show you a new land." So for number 1, let's see what we're going to draw. Guys, number 2. Abraham and Sarah and all their helpers packed pots and pans, clothes and tents, food and water, and put their bundles of on their camels and donkeys. Abraham, Sarah, and some of their family began to walk. Traveling was hot. It was hard work. Remember, there was no cars back then, or air conditioning for that matter. When they stopped, they put up tents, built a fire, cooked their dinner, and slept in rolled up blankets. When it was time to move on, they packed up everything, got fresh water, and walked some more. So, let's see, that's number 2. Alright guys, number 3. They must have often wondered where they were going, and if they would ever get the land that God had promised them. But Abraham believed God. And one day, they came to a place of hills and valleys covered with good grass. It was beautiful. "This is the land I promised to you," God told Abraham. The land was called Canaan. God had kept his promise he made to Abraham. So, number 3, let's see what we're going to draw. Guys, number 4. Now God had also promised that Abraham would have many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But Abraham and Sarah didn't have any children yet, and they were old. But God told Abraham again, "You will have a son. And from him there will come many more grandchildren than you can imagine." He said, "Look at the stars. Can you count them? You'll have more grandchildren than there are stars in the sky." And Abraham believed God. So for number 4, let's see what we're going to draw. Guys, number 5. More years went by. Abraham and Sarah grew even older. But God told Abraham his promise again. And again, Abraham also believed God, even though it made him laugh. Abraham wondered, "How can we have a son? I'm 100 years old. And Sarah, my wife, she's 90. Pretty old." So for number 5, let's see what we're going to draw. Number 6. Even more time went by and still no baby. But one day, 3 very important visitors came to visit Abraham in his tent. In fact, one of the visitors was actually God. although he looked like a man. As Abraham and the visitors talked, Sarah listened at the door. She heard God say that she would soon have a son. Sarah then laughed. She thought, "I'm so old. Will I really have a child?" But God said, "Nothing is too hard for the Lord. Sarah really will have a son." So number 6, let's see what we're going to draw. Guys, number 7. At the exact time God had promised, Abraham and Sarah did have a baby boy. They named him Isaac, which means laughter. Sarah and Abraham remembered God's promise every time they called Isaac's name. So for number 7, let's see what we're going to draw. Alright guys, that was our last drawing. So I just want to kind of expound on what we really talked about. See, what set Abraham apart from anyone else was his faith in God. When God made a promise, Abraham believed him. And guess what? That's how we need to live our lives as well. Abraham is known as the father of the faith. One, biologically that's true, but more importantly, he kept God's faith. He kept the faith. He knew that God would honor his promises. And because of God honoring his promises, and more importantly, Abraham believing God, great things happen in Abraham's life. But guess what? That just doesn't mean a story we hear that was 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. That means that your life can change for the better, even as a kid. The promises God makes, we find those things in the Bible. When we do what God says, when we do the right things, guess what? God is faithful in honoring his promises. Just like when he makes a promise, we need to believe him. So, I want you to think about those things this week. Think about how honoring God, think about how being faithful to God, which means following God's word and listening to him and believing him, can help your life. I guarantee you won't be disappointed. So, have a great week this week, and guess what? We'll see you next week. Have a good one, guys.
If you would like to know more about Living Word Christian Fellowship, please visit our website. Also, every Sunday at 10 a.m. we will have live streams of our services, so make sure you check those out as well. And if you haven't already, make sure you like us on Facebook. On Facebook, you'll see wonderful, inspiring posts and also our live stream of our services.
Don't forget to subscribe to our church's YouTube channel. You can follow us at Living Word Christian Fellowship NYC.